My name is Hania Radziejowska. I'm the head of the Pilecki-Institute Berlin, and I would like to welcome all of you to our conference, to the Pilecki-Institute. And yes, I feel very honored and delighted that we can today start. And also I would like to congratulate you that you managed to get to Pilecki-Institute in spite of all these problems and troubles. And now, first, I would like to invite here the main conservator of City Berlin, Mr. Rauhut. The floor is yours.
Yes, thank you for the invitation and a warm welcome to you all to Berlin. I just had a look at this really nicely produced program to your forward, and you ended with a sentence: in the German capital at the Brandenburg Gate, exercising modernity brings East and West together in the hopes that reflection on the 20th and 21st centuries will help us to rethink of modernity. And you mentioned the Brandenburg Gate, and when I thought about how I introduce you and how I introduce this conference, I also thought the Brandenburg Gate is so close I have to mention it. Because if you go outside now, you will see that there are some remains of some orange paint we are still trying to remove. I can assure you we will be successful in the end, but it will take some time. And this orange paint is the relict of a sign, actually, of a climate crisis we are in today, and also the sign that this climate crisis is in a way two-faced. It's on one hand a social crisis, but on the other hand, it also makes us rethink our relationship to architecture and planning. And I thought this was a very good start also to think about this conference. Because why? Nowadays we are with the climate crisis also in what we call in Germany the Bauwende, the idea of changing the building sector, changing the way we perceive, we do architecture and city planning. And when you look at our discussions at the moment, you will see that there's not one answer we have, but it's more that we have many answers. Some are similar, but some really also do things rather opposing, and one then could put the title of this conference, Divergences and Convergences, also about the discussion we have about the building sector nowadays on the top. And bringing this as example, I hope it will help us to also understand modernism. Modernism is not just an architectural or an planning concept, but which is also a political or social project of the 20th century, but also a project which needed to find its form in architecture and in city planning. And one title, which I think is one word, which is very good to summarize it, is the multi-phases of modernism in reaction to the 20th century. And this could also maybe be the result or the title at the end of our conference. Multi-phases does not mean that architecture is just a lot of single ideas and standing next to each other, but I think the multi-phase idea is very valuable because it tells us that there are links between the different concepts. And I will show in my introductory presentation also how we try to link different modernisms in Berlin to one. And I believe this is also the task of our conference, to find these links between the different ideas of modernism and make them visible and once again becoming political in a time with growing nationalism and aggression. This is more than important nowadays. This is also why we started the project of the Triennale of the Moderne, Triennial of Modernism. And I would like to say thank you to Ben Buschfeld and Robert Huber to continuously working on that project with many partners and bringing all those partners together. And one of the partners is, once again, I have to say, the Pilecki-Institute. I really would like to thank you also to once again organizing a conference and being part of this community, bringing us all together. I hope and I'm sure it will be a very successful day. Sorry, days. We're not just meeting one day.
Thank you very much. From my side, I would like perhaps to remind, I mean, we are after 1 month of celebrating our 5 years of our program, Exercising Modernity, which, in fact, that the program has started before we even established Pilecki-Institute in Berlin, and I think it's very important for one moment to reflect on that, because the truth is that our institution, we are focused on this experience of 20th century, and we started from this reflecting on ideas of modernity and this problem of these bright and dark sides of modernity. I mean, because it's like, I mean, now to simplify this, but when we, of course, dig deeper, we see how many stuff we can discover. Even today, I would say, we experience this bright and dark side of modernity, in this meaning that this worker unit rights is absolutely the achievement of the 20th century and 19th century. On the other side, it's very difficult sometimes, but the son of my partner, he absolutely was delighted today that he cannot get to the school. So, of course, that's good that young generation sees this bright side of the modernity. I come from Warsaw and from Wola district, and when I was thinking about this conference, which is focused on the architecture, of course, in this very wide, this broader meaning, and I would say this, even this exhibition shows this story. I mean, Wola district, I was always very much engaged in this this movement, city movements in Wola district, and one of them, it was dedicated to discover the story of one of the first housing estate in Warsaw. It's the name of it is Wawelberg settlement, and it's a very beautiful story. It's like in the end of the 19th century, in times of this industrial revolution, the Polish Jews, Hippolyt and Ludwika Wawelberg, they were dreaming about Polish independence, and they were dreaming not about national state. They were dreaming about the society where people of different religions, different opinions can live together and create this society with equal access to culture, to parks, to equal society status. I mean, everything what is included when we think, what does it mean, what we think when we remind these generally European values, yes, what was achieved in this 20th century. And they built this housing estate, and it really worked. It's a very beautiful story. You can visit if you go to Warsaw, I recommend. It's a very absolutely incredible place, and the local community were fighting to commemorate this story. And of course, we see also during, in 20th century, this also Second World War, and in Wola district, in Kolonia Wawelberga, these people, almost all of them were murdered by one of these totalitarian regimes. So it's like also this experience, what does it mean that you dream about this good future, in this meaning, in these all social dimensions, but also you dream and you face really this evil. And this reflection on that, it's, I think, that we could, in these programs, Exercising Modernity, create this space for dialogue, for discussion, for exchange. I'm very happy and proud, I mean, because it was like this common work of our Exercising Modernity team. But first of all, I would like to mention our head of our program, Exercising Modernity, Małgorzata Jędrzejczyk, and our curatorial team is also Ola Janus, who is here. And thank you very much for your incredible work. Thank you very much to my team, Witold Okuń, who is part of this Exercising Modernity team, and Karolina Głowińska, Patryk Szostak, and whole Pilecki-Institute team who supported during these last days to organize this conference. And of course, thank you very much. Our partners, I hope also it will be chance on Saturday, I think, to visit the exhibition which we opened a month ago with our partners, our friends who are also members of conference program committee. So Ben Buschfeld and Robert Huber, and I think it's enough for now. Małgosia Jędrzejczyk, please, the floor is yours.
Hello, on behalf of the Pilecki-Institute, but also on behalf of the program Exercising Modernity, I would like to express a warm welcome to each one of you, and I'm really pleased and honored that you decided to attend our conference. And our gathering today is more than just a symposium, it is a nomen omen, convergence of minds and a significant contribution to critically rethinking and analyzing the history of European architecture. With our speakers and guests from different parts of Europe, and this conference seeks to shift the lens from a vertical to a horizontal perspective, exploring the dynamics beyond political, geographical and cultural borders. As Jean-Louis Cohen stated, a history of modern architecture cannot be limited to a history of aesthetic influences. Therefore, instead of an approach focused on a one-way flow from a center to a periphery, let us imagine a moved, shifted map or constellation, a map which challenges unidirectional narratives based on a principle of subordination and dependency, a map where the vectors of movement are aligned in different directions, creating alternative to the one based on geopolitical evaluations and simplistic categories, such as East and West. It also encourages reflection on modern architecture through the lens of multitudes of histories, but also her stories, experiences, breaks, discontinuities, circulations of people, ideas, and objects. So a unison instead of a polyphony. Over the past 5 years, within the program Exercising Modernity, run by the Pilecki-Institute in Berlin, we have attempted to bring together different perspectives and varied ways of understanding the 20th century, including perspectives both on and from Central and Eastern Europe. With a specific focus on architecture, this has been always a core of Exercising Modernity program. Exercising Modernity explores the architectural field in a broader context of societal transformations, dreams, and hopes for a better future. Exchange of ideas, but also dark sides of modernity, what Hania has just mentioned. In the 1920s, Stefania Zachorska, one of the most intriguing Polish art and architectural critics, emphasized that it is necessary, it's a quote, to understand that architecture, by creating the ground for life, can shape that life, end of the quote. However, that's not all. As architecture, similar to art in Aby Warburg's cultural theory, can be understood in its interweaving with contemporary factors of real life. This it can be considered as a seismograph, sensitively registering cultural, political, societal tensions. Architecture allows us to look on the past through the prism of sometimes maybe inconsistent, contradictory, marginalized or lesser known narratives, which create, however, as well our shared heritage. Therefore, I sincerely hope that this conference, bringing together researchers, architects, designers, architectural historians, urban activists, civic society actors from various countries, also from Central and Eastern Europe, will contribute to a more inclusive and nuanced approach to thinking about Central and Eastern European modernism. Before I pass the microphone to our partners and co-organizer of the conference, I would like to express my great gratitude to all those involved in organizing this conference. I would like to express my gratitude, of course, to our partner institutions, so Brock's Bauhaus Reuse, Zukunftsgeräusche, Ben Buschwald, ETOM, European Triennial of Modernism, Stiftung für Deutsch-Polnische Zusammenarbeit, Embassy of the Republic of Lithuania in Germany. And of course, I express my huge gratitude to co-curator of Exercising Modernity program, Alexandra Janus, and of course to my dear, very resistant colleagues from the Pilecki-Institute, Hanna Radziejowska, Mateusz Fałkowski, directors of the Institute, Karolina Głowińska, Kamila Szuba, Patryk Szostak, Maksymilian Steinhoff, Piotr Kowalski, Jakub Świetlik, Mikołaj Łuczyński, Anna Molenda, Klaudia Broszczajt, Adam Czerwień. So thank you guys for amazing work, and last but not least, of course, big thanks go to Witold Okuń, who is coordinator of the program Exercising Modernity, and who has done massive work with organizing also this conference. And most of you already know Witold Okuń because of email exchange you have had previously. So, yeah. Thank you once again for being part of this event, and I wish you all an inspiring conference, and hope you will feel good in Berlin and also at the Pilecki-Institute in Berlin. Thank you for coming.
So, first of all, also a warm welcome from us. Thanks you to everyone who followed our open call. We were really thrilled and overwhelmed by the number of interesting proposals, and I can tell you we had a hard time making a selection. Thank you all for being here. Thank you for the Pilecki-Institute for hosting us. And what we intend to do today, tomorrow, and also on Saturday on the side events is to take a look beyond our little German courtyard and lift partly the Iron Curtain and to see, which still exists in some minds, and we are hoping to take a closer look at Europeans' common foundation of values that hopefully prove resistant and resilient in this time. We, which means my colleague Robert Huber and I, were delighted when the team of the Pilecki-Institute approached us a few months ago with the question if we want to help to curate and organize this conference. And of course, we wanted to. After all, this cooperation and especially this framework offers ideal conditions to dive deeper into two topics that have occupied us massively while acting as the curator duo of the Triennial der Moderne, Triennale der Moderne in German, in the past 2 years of events. Because when you organize such a festival about building culture and modernism in the once divided frontline city Berlin, which is basically the Triennale, you automatically have to deal with the attributions in East and West. And secondly, at least in our specific constellation with Dessau and Weimar, you also have to deal with the predominance of the very popular global brand or label Bauhaus, which is so popular that everything and everyone is quickly pigeonholed into this category, which of course, as you all know, doesn't even do justice to our local heroes here in Berlin, such as Bruno and Max Taut, Erich Mendelssohn, Hermann Henselmann, Hans Scharoun, and many others. But still, this is always a topic. In 2022, we therefore began to look beyond our national borders, and together with Docomomo International and ICOMOS, we started to set up a European network, the already mentioned European Triennial of Modernism, short ETOM, and where my colleague Robert Huber will tell you a few words about it.
Yeah, thank you, Ben. So will there be an interim applause? Of course. Yeah, so I also, of course, have to thank you all first for coming, and I just can emphasize on this. It was really a very tough decision to decide between so many really very well done and very well presented proposals for the open call. I think it was over 70 in the end, and this was really a tough decision. And but this not only means that this will be a successful, hopefully successful conference for these 2 days. It means that there is still a lot more to explore and a lot more of diverse voices and different diverse actors who are actually in touch with these topics and who are pursuing these topics, which we will discuss in the upcoming 2 days. And this leads me to what Ben ended with. Yes, the idea for this European Triennial of Modernism, of course, once originated from the Triennale der Moderne and the idea of having a regional, in that case, and decentralized festival about the development and genesis of modernism. But it, of course, had a second agenda from the beginning to really unlock and draw attention for the diverse, actually oranges, and for the diverse also protagonists of modernism, and not only them from the times of the Genesis, but also for the diverse scope of 2 days researchers, actors, activists who take care of the heritage or of the also very important connection of the topics from those days to current pressing challenges of urban development or societal development. So the idea of these bringing together different countries, different projects, transnational approaches is to link not only the probably unexplored or maybe on the one hand maybe just putative missing links between Eastern and Western development of modernism, but also to connect 2 days actors and joint topics which we are facing in all of the Central European countries along or on the fringe of the former Iron Curtain. We therefore gave these initiative. We're still not there yet with this European Triennial of Modernism, but we gave the initiative the motto diverse modernism, modern diversity, and I just want to repeat that because it's not just like a slogan. It really is something with what has a deeper meaning. I want to keep it short. We will also have a lessons learned round in the end of the 2 days. So for findings, there will be enough time then. But maybe just let me end mentioning one important aspect Ben mentioned for the cooperation we established. And well, now I think it's more than 40 partners which we have somehow in this framework, and it's over 14 countries. And there would not be enough time to mention them all here, and it's also not the right spot. But Ben already mentioned Docomomo International and ICOMOS. So this is really, I think, an approach which is also helping us to disseminate the corporations we're working on, and also it will be a way to feature projects on the way, like, for example, also this event today, or these 2 days, as we called it, kind of the triangle for modernism between our ETOM initiative, Docomomo International, and ICOMOS. And so the idea is that we always, if it's possible, to feature joint or transnational projects, so that we not only think about this big approach for developing such a triennial festival, but also work with events step by step to grow and reach out for further partners and spread the word. So this was firstly done 2022 with like our project Modernism in Ukraine, which was of course also due to the current situation, and we are very happy that we could continue this this year as well. For the 2-day conference or the 3-day event we are having here, I think this is just the beginning or one step in a row of cooperations, of partnerships, together with you guys from the Pilecki-Institute, together with a lot of you in the audience, which we already knew or got to know from previous encounters and meetings and sharing of ideas, and hopefully as well with everybody who is attending newly due to the call or just by interest joining us in the audience. Yeah, so I would end it here, and also from my side, I wish you a wonderful 2 days and interesting insights on the topic, and very curious, especially for 2 keynotes we will hear today and tomorrow. At first from Akush Marawansky. We will introduce him later, but probably you all know him already. One of the first thinkers and researchers really taking care and hitting on this topic of Central European modernism. And secondly, but just because we can't have them all, both on one day, Henrietta Moračíková, also very well-known writer and theoretian from Slovakia. We will have her keynote tomorrow at last, before we have a final round for lessons learned. So thank you already. We are looking very forward to hear your lectures, and thank you again all for joining us. Ingrid, I would just like, I would just introduce you to the audience, but you can already. So now we're coming to our first panel, and I would like to introduce the host or moderator of the first panel, and then Ingrid Ruudi will take over the lead here. Ingrid Ruudi is an art historian and curator based in Tallinn. She's senior researcher and associate at the Estonian Academy of Arts. And in 2020, she defended her Ph.D. also at the Estonian Academy with a dissertation about spaces of the interregnum, transformations in Estonian architecture and art, 1968 to 1994, which she concluded. 86, I'm so sorry, 1986, and I'm reading it out and making a mistake, I'm so sorry, to 1994 with cum laude. Her research topics range from the second half of the 20th century, intersections of art and architecture, architecture as social and political agent, and ranges also to genders in gender studies in architecture. Most recently, she presented different researches at conferences recently in Helsinki 2023, but also 2019 in New York, or at the Gender Conference in Lisbon 2021. And she curated research exhibitions, several successfully in Estonian Museum of Architecture, like Visions for a New Society, A Room of One's Own, Feminist Questions to Architecture, which was also in 2019, as well as an exhibition for the 11th Venice Architecture Biennial in 2008, Tallinn Urban Installations Festival in LIFT 2011. So you see a lot of activities. And since 2021, she is also editor-in-chief of the Estonian art history journal, Studies on Art and Architecture. So please welcome Ingrid Ruudi, and she will call the panelists for the first round.
Thank you, Robert, for the introduction. Good morning, everybody. I have the honor to open the conference with the first panel, Contested Architectural Heritage Across Central and Eastern Europe. And I believe that it's really appropriate that the conference that focuses on acknowledging, analyzing, and interpreting the architectural heritage of modernism starts with a panel that addresses these questions from the perspective of the present. Because, of course, modernist architecture does not operate in some kind of a historical vacuum, but it is actively participating in the dialogues of the present day and the identity politics of today. So the meanings attached to this architecture and the judgments determining its present and its future use are very much tied to its ability to speak to us today. And of course, architecture speaks to different people in different ways. Architecture heritage, I believe, is at its best and at its most powerful when it's able to embody many different layers of history and to show us the complexity of historical, social, and political circumstances. So this panel today focuses on 5 case studies from Germany, Poland, Estonia, and Ukraine, which highlight the contradictions in dealing with examples of the built environment that are symbolically highly loaded, but can raise ambivalent or controversial reactions in the general public, or sometimes also in the professional sphere. The value of modernist architectural heritage sometimes finds itself in quite difficult entanglements with the debates of the present day. We will also notice how the political events of the present day may prompt at rethinking or re-evaluating the legacy of the past. And we are reminded that the status of the recent heritage especially is never rock solid, but is rather in constant flux and dialogue with the present. So in order to preserve the modernist heritage for the future and to be able to add it as a valuable layer in the complex phenomenon that is cultural identity, I believe that we as researchers of the recent past have an even more pressing task to make this heritage communicable, to engage the communities that are involved, and to address its different layers and meanings in a meaningful way. So we are starting with a case which is most local, from Berlin. So I have the pleasure to introduce Dr. Christoph Rauhut, who already actually spoke, who is the state conservator and director of the Berlin Heritage Authority, and has previously worked as an advisor at the General Office of the German Cultural Heritage Committee at the Federal Government Commissioner for Culture and Media from 2016. Among other things, he was responsible for the monitoring and coordination of the European Year of Cultural Heritage 2018 and for providing expert policy advice. As a state conservator, he has paid special attention to the necessity of protecting also the more recent heritage, securing the protection of several landmarks from the 1970s and 1980s. Dr. Rauhut studied architecture at Aachen University and at ETH Zurich, and completed his doctorate with a dissertation about the Zürcher, how is it in English? City dwellings, city building. He is a member of various international and national professional associations, and among others on the board of Construction History Society. So the floor is yours. Am I on the way of the pictures, perhaps?
Yeah. So it would be nice to have something to flip the images, or do I can also just, thank you. So once again, welcome. And I hope I was asked to present the project of Karl-Marx-Allee and lnterbau, architecture and urbanism. Let's go one back, if we can, of Postwar Berlin. And obviously we have a very diverse heritage of modernism in Berlin. I would just like to remind you of the Berlin Modern Housing Estate, one of our proud World Heritage sites in Berlin. But speaking at a conference about post-war architecture and also convergences and divergences, I really should focus on our latest proposal for the German tentative list for UNESCO World Heritage Sites, which we submitted in 2021 to the National Board, which is now in the process of selecting the new tentative list, and we will actually probably hear by the end of this year with many other candidates if we were successful or not. So this is a project we have been working on for quite a long time, and I will comment at the end also on the importance on working on this project. And when I speak here, I'm really just one part of a very large team, and rather the spokesman than the author of this project. It's really a collaborative project. For this project, it's very important to remind you of what the city of Berlin looked like directly after the Second World War, which is a picture to the right. It was heavily destroyed, and very directly after the World War, there was also the question of how to rebuild the city, and one of the most important documents showing you also the break in city planning is the collective plan by Hans Scharoun, who was the head city planner of Berlin at the time, which was developed in 1945, 1946 already, and which shows you quite well what the idea was: to have new expressways through the city of Berlin, and also make a division of the different functions of the city to really reorganize the city. And we can see some projects which have been built or developed really within this idea. And one is in the first area, which I will show you, which is, let's see, in the area of Karl-Marx-Allee 1, Karl-Marx Boulevard 1, but which is really an uprunner to this larger project, which is the Wohnzelle Friedrichshain, living cell Friedrichshain, built and developed from 1949 to 1941, also by Hans Scharoun, Richard Paulik, Ludmilla Herzenstein, and which is, I think, a very good example of a very also almost radical post-modernism in Berlin. And you see here this first bit, which was really also in this idea of the collective plan by Hans Scharoun, where you would have the housing as one part, and you would have different functions in different areas of the city. And you also already see here the main street, which was one of the expressways in the idea of Hans Scharoun. And this street, at the time then called Stalinallee, was really the idea to continue. But it is important to understand that there was almost like a break in the idea of how modernism developed. And in 1949, there was a founding of the two German states, and that led to a very important trip of all the East Berlin planners to Moscow in the spring of 1950, and they did come back, and in autumn of 1950 presented the 16 principles of urban planning for the new GDR, which can be summarized very, very briefly as socialist in content but national in the form. And the first example of built example of this new idea is the Weberwiese high-rise, a building by Hermann Henselmann, who will be one of the most important planners for East Berlin for many years to follow. And he really also then was one of the many planners who worked on the continuation of Stalinallee, which really is the idea of having a great boulevard going to the city. It would lead to the city center. But it's quite intriguing that you wouldn't start the construction at the city center, but you would almost start a bit further out, and there was almost of a progress of building this city coming from the outskirts towards the center. And this city planning project was really characterized by the large boulevard in the middle, which you see here. And it would have almost monumental sites where you would have gate impressions coming into the city. And obviously those drawings by Hermann Henselmann and these plans, they do look almost, they do look very strong, but it's important to remember that really the idea between this first big national project of the GDR was to provide housing. And that's what you see here, that those buildings do have a lot of housing in flats in them, and they were really modern. And that's also what, when you go into those buildings nowadays, it's really striking that it's they do have this traditional look, but when you go into the interior, you see how modern the housing was for this time. And I show you some images just so that you get an impression of the Karl-Marx-Allee one, which is taken from a joint project with the Hermann Henselmann Stiftung, a small newspaper reproduced and gave away to all the inhabitants in those areas. I really hope that you have the time to walk along Karl-Marx-Allee 1 and 2, because I think it can only be experienced by walking along this boulevard to see also the greatness really of this architecture, and see how well it has been brought to nowadays. Obviously, there was a reaction in the west part of the city, which is the Hansaviertel. The decision to rebuild the Hansaviertel was taken in 1953, so in the process of building up Karl-Marx-Allee 1. And it was the decision to make an international building competition. I'm sorry that those plans are not so well that I can show you anything on them. But here are some photos, and once again you see that the Hansaviertel, or the South Hansaviertel, was heavily destroyed. And what the West did was almost like the opposite of what the East did, where they asked their planners to work on it. They did an international competition to really invite international modernism to Berlin to rebuild the city. And it was Otto Bartning and his team who won the competition. But it's really 55 architects who from the Western worldwide scene who were involved into this project. You see Le Corbusier, Walter Gropius, Rolf Schwedler, Otto Bartning, many important architects of the time coming together and trying to create an image of Western post-war modernism here in Berlin. What is very interesting is that also not only the buildings were very important, but also the green areas. Walter Rosso, one of the green planners, said it was really a spatial composition of house bodies and tree bodies, so it's landscape of city which they pushed. And you see that also especially the exteriors had a very high quality. And it's also to mention that obviously there were a number of female planners also involved in this project. Hertha Hammerbacher is probably the most and the best known one. There was obviously also an American influence in this project, which was the Congress Hall by Hugh Stubbins. Which was not directly in the Hansaviertel, but I think it's very important to show you this image. You see here the building of the Congress Hall, and this is the Reichstag, which was at the border. So you were really like looking from the new Congress Hall to the Reichstag, and I think there was already this idea of reunification of the city. It was not that they did think the city separately, but there was this idea, at least of the city planners, to have the city back together. And we know from the time that they also looked at the projects in the East, and the ones from the East obviously looked at the projects, and the West there was a constant flow of visitors, but also of the planners, at least looking at those projects. Once again, the Hansaviertel was, even though it was a great architectural celebration, it was also the main task was to provide housing for a city which was heavily destroyed, and part of this entire project was also to show those exemplary flats and show how you would be living in a modern, or you could live in a modern flat. Some images are also taken just recently, also show you how well preserved those buildings are. Once again, if we have some sun maybe on the weekend, we should really go there, because it is one of the most beautiful areas in Berlin, even now in the autumn, where it's not as green as it is in spring and summer. But there was a reaction in the East, and this is Karl-Marx-Allee 2. This is this area. So we had this as the first bit which was built, and here's Alexanderplatz. And looking at those drawings by Josef Kaiser, you can see that the form of modernism totally changed now. It's really more the industrialized industrialized idea of modernism, and you see also that the way the boulevard is created is somehow different, in that we now have the housing slabs further back, but then that we do have little pavilions, as we can see here in those drawings, and some cultural buildings closer to the boulevard. This is an aerial image also showing you that it's no longer just the boulevard, but it really, there's a connection going into the or not the backyard, but it was really more perceived as an entire area, which one boulevard in the middle. This KMA2 includes many really striking buildings, the Kino International, which now closed for renovation for some years, unluckily, but it will look as good as it did. After that is one of the main highlights. And another highlight is, for example, the House of the Teacher by Hermann Henselmann with this beautiful image of Walter Bommaker. And we are here at Alexanderplatz, really at the city center of the East Berlin at the time. So my time is finished, and I will come to an end by showing you some recent pictures once again. The question is of how to bring all this heritage together as a joint project, and we did that by really working on the project of a UNESCO World Heritage proposal. And I point you out here the criteria we had, which was the unique meeting of significant exchange of international architectural trends of post-war modernism. But which is also important for us was that it's really the unique development of new and modern urban landscape. And those were different, but they belong together in the center of a heavily destroyed and divided metropolis. This is a proposal we submitted, and we are at the moment waiting for the result. And I would finish on a remark on the importance of this proposal, which is maybe can be seen in this image with this exhibition at the Hansa-Bibliothek, living in the heritage. I think nowadays this proposal is really widely accepted on the political level. There are many exhibitions on it, there are many institutions and initiatives working on it, but one really has to say it was not always like this, especially in the 90s after the reunification of Germany. There was little appreciation of this post-war heritage, and there was really more an appreciation for interwar modernism, or even earlier, the Kohlhoff plans for the Alexanderplatz are more the idea of bringing back interwar modernism, or the 1996 Planwerk Innenstadtplan was really even further, looking back even further. And it was really a fight to preserve this heritage at the time, and it only gradually started to be accepted. And I think the inscription of the Berlin modernism housing estates in 2008 was really one of the changing points, since initiatives of cultural heritage, but also the conservatives and many politicians saw that there's a value, and we can really go even further up than just accepting this heritage, but we can develop it to a World Heritage site. And it was in 2013 when this proposal was, by the proposal of initiatives, not the politicians, not of the Heritage Authority, was firstly proposed for the German tentative list, and it was put on hold for the first proposal. That's why we resubmitted it in 2021 once again. But I think what is interesting is that we now do really have a broad acceptance and a broad support for this heritage and this initiative to develop it to a World Heritage site. Even if we are successful, what we do have is a really strong network And this really goes across all the political parties, across civil society, across the heritage authorities, and this is really a success, and I do hope that we can build on this success in the future. Thank you very much.
It works now? Okay. Thank you so much. And really, if anybody has time, do go to have a walk, because these two environments really embody really intensely in a tactile way these values and environments of these periods, and you can really feel the respective ideologies coming to you through the actual architecture. But questions from the audience, I believe you have plenty.
Maybe I can, because I really had, I was given 10 minutes to present an entire UNESCO proposal, which is very hard. I can just let you know that we do have on the website of the Monument Authority the entire proposal. It's most of it is in German, but there's also partly in English translation, and we do also have on YouTube a very nice film which actually involves all the different stakeholders for this proposal, and that's really important to me, that we have this network, and it really, there are many people supporting this project.
Yeah, thanks. Until you gather your ideas, I was thinking about Berlin is really saturated with history and with recent history, and I was thinking, when you are trying to communicate to these issues to the wider public, do you see it as an aid or as a hindrance? Because on one hand, it probably makes it easier to communicate because everybody is so aware of all this history present. But I guess it could also, in some people, generate some kind of heritage fatigue or something that we should look towards the future instead.
No, I think we're very lucky in Berlin that the Berliners are very open to heritage in general, so I don't feel any fatigue. And obviously, Berlin has a lot of 20th century heritage, which is easier to connect to, especially if you come as a visitor. Many people have a link to the history of to the 20th century, and they know about the diversion of the Cold War, and then you can go to the, for example, to the Berliner Mauer, and you do have already, even if you are not a Berliner, you do have a kind of a personal link to it. But at the same time, it's a challenge, and especially with this heritage, it was also a challenge, because at the beginning there was obviously more the interest in, let's say, in your own backyard. But really what this project delivered to us was putting, let's say, 3 or 4 or even more different stories, heritage stories, together into one bigger story. And by doing that, I think it's also a project of reunification in the city, and that's why it's so valuable to us.
But I believe it's perhaps more difficult to accept the Karl-Marx-Allee part. Do you feel that the people living there, do they identify with this legacy? Do they form a sensible community?
They do. Again, the great advantage of this entire, of all 3 projects is that there was the aim to provide very high quality housing. So all those flats do have a good living quality, and they're all very much in the center of Berlin. And I think, despite all our different views on the architecture and our labels of socialist modernism, international modernism, people do appreciate the quality of those buildings. And that's why we do have in all three areas many people who live there for a long time, and I do know that people have lived there from the very start. They still live there or give it to their family members, and they do identify themselves with those areas. There has been a discussion about the question of who owns those buildings, but this is, I think, it's also part of the discussion, because obviously those was like they were built in a state endeavor, and now a lot of those buildings are privatized, but this doesn't mirror lessen the quality of them.
That is really encouraging to hear. Yeah.
I have a strong voice, so I don't need a microphone. I understand that you got, just 10 minutes, but what about the controversy of this kind of legacy? This is a DDR, and DDR, as we know, was about very many things. It was about Stasi, it's about certain planning policies, about educating society in certain ways. And if you eliminate all this context now, for example, just moving this into a kind of world heritage, don't you think that some parts of the whole very complex and very complicated picture might be missing, huh?
I mean, you're right and you're wrong. The heritage of Berlin is a lot wider, and you can't tell the history of the GDR by just picking out maybe those very representative, also in a way successful plannings, and then lift them to a world heritage. I do agree that would be a danger. But what we tried with our proposal was not to enlist the GDR architecture for the World Heritage, but rather to show how broad post-war modernism was directly after the World War, and that we have in Berlin this very unique moment where it kind of all comes together, and it's standing next to each other, and it's reflecting upon each other. And this it's I think very important to accept that even the architecture in the West, in the GDR or wherever, it's not happening on its own. It's always in reflection with what is happening somewhere else. And that is maybe what we try with our proposal on a very small level. But I can assure you that we're also having, we do try to tell the story of GDR architecture more fully in Berlin, and at some other in some other instances, we are also very heavily criticized that we preserve this heritage in all its extent. That's in that way, maybe very briefly.
Okay, thank you so much. Join me with thanking Christoph Rauhut. And now we are continuing with our next speaker, but before, for clarification, to be able to manage our time in a more rational way and to make more meaningful links between the presenters, we are actually going to take further questions after all the panelists have presented. So, a small change. So for the next speaker, I'm happy to introduce my dear colleague from the Estonian Academy of Arts, Dr. Marii Laanemets.
She is a senior researcher at the Institute of Art History and Visual Culture, researching on 1960s, 1970s art in the Soviet Union and its intersections with architecture and design practices, on post-war abstractionism and the aesthetics of modernization in Eastern Europe. She has studied art history at the Estonian Academy of Arts and has earned her Ph.D. at the Humboldt University in Berlin. She has published several articles and essays on the topics related to these issues. Most recently, in this year, she curated the archive for the exhibition Retrotopia, designed for social spaces at Kunstgewerbemuseum Berlin, and also authored an exhibition and a book together with Andres Kurg called Forecast and Fantasy, Architecture Without Borders, 1960s to 1980s, which took place at the Estonian Museum of Architecture. Her other projects include Abstraction as Open Experiment at Tallinn Art Hall 2018, Our Metamorphic Futures, Design, Technical Aesthetics and Experimental Architecture in the Soviet Union 1960-1980, which took place in Vilnius National Gallery and Estonian Museum of Applied Art and Design, and also Environments, Projects, Concepts, Architects of the Tallinn School, which took place in Estonian Museum of Architecture. So the floor is yours.
Thank you, Ingrid. And thank you also to the organizers for invitation. So I'm very excited to be here in this, what seems to be a very inspiring event, and of course I'm very honored to talk here about Linnahall, so the building that is actually the Tallinn City Concert Hall, which is, I would say, a post-socialist building par excellence. So there is also no other building in Tallinn or in entire Estonia that has provoked such a huge public resonance and produced so much controversy and heated discussions after it was completed, and especially since the 1990s. Thus, Linnahall, which has been under protection as architectural monument since 1997, as was proposed by Dr. Momo, is, I think, a very intriguing example to think about modernity and about the Soviet time architectural heritage. And also maybe the questions for later, how actually to protect and what to protect. So for my talk, which is only 10 minutes long, which is a very short time, I thought to revisit the history of the Linnahall and some original ideas of the project, and also try to show or reflect a little bit about the different like resonances that it has produced during the time. And especially as it seems certain that the building will indeed be demolished in the near future. So, or hopefully not. Linnahall, as I said, is a multi-purpose culture and sport venue, originally the Vladimir Ilyich Lenin Culture and Sports Palace. So the planning of which began in 1967, in 1976, and was completed in 1980, just in time for the Moscow Olympic Sailing Regatta held in Tallinn. The architects of the Linnahall were Rainer Karp, already a renowned architect at the time, and his younger colleague Riina Altmäe, and they both worked in the largest state construction company, Eesti Projekt, specialized on public buildings. And the interior design team was led by Ülo Sirp, and of course there was also engineers involved and other. So, as a typical cultural palace, like a Soviet in Soviet typology, the building combined different functions. It included a 4,600-seat amphitheater-shaped concert hall. Initially, the space even was, the space of the stage was to be transformable, so it could be transformed from a chamber hall to a congress auditorium, from theater stage to sports arena. However, to the rush, this technical system and many others were actually not built. So let's see, and the 3,000-seat ice rink was completed in 1981, and it was meant not only for sport events like hockey matches, but also for fashion shows, for circus, and it was also open for the general public for ice skating. Furthermore, the complex included a cafe, a restaurant, a gaming hall, a bowling alley with a bar, an exhibition hall, and it employed at the beginning 500 people. And so in 1981, also the painter N. Poldros was commissioned to create a monumental tapestry, The Life of People, measuring 503 square meters and weighing nearly 100 tons. So, and the rug was woven by 3 weavers of the art products factory Ars, and they completed it in almost 4 years. So, at the beginning of the 1990s, new facilities were included, and Linnahall became a kind of production site. It hosted a recording studio. The first private radio station, Kuku, was broadcast from there, as well as the studios of the first private television channel. So, and outside, it also housed a harbor for passenger ships sailing between Helsinki and Tallinn, and even a heliport. So, the architecture of the Tallinn Linnahall has most often been compared to prehistoric buildings such as the pre-Columbian step pyramids or the Mesopotamian ziggurats. The inclined walls have also been seen as a reference or a reflection of the walls of a 17th century fortification nearby. So in reality, the form was much more determined by the practical matters. The building could not block the harbour railway that ran through the territory at that time. So I think it was right here. So it had to function as a bridge, an overpass, but it could also not be too high, so as not to conceal the view from the sea to the skyline of Tallinn's old town. So the result is a multi-level, almost endless roof surface that forms a spectacular viewing platform, a fascinating landscape with various ascents and descents. Just as unexpected is the front facade of the building, so the entrance, which is hidden there between the 2 giant staircases. Thus, to enter the building, you first had to climb up the stairs, and then to get to the ice rink, then you had to descend again via narrow corridors. So in this sense, the architecture seems very physical and offering very specific experience of space by going always up and down. Let me see. So this is a bit newer pictures, to also see what was the color scheme of the house. So the interior as well was designed as an open space, so foyer opened directly into the concert hall. It was possible, however, to separate it with a hanging wall, and which originally even the panels were supposed to descend with a shift in relation to each other, so it would create a wave-like movement. But this was abandoned for various, mostly technical, but also acoustic reasons. While talking about his public buildings, as not general about Linnahall, Karp himself has pointed, like one of the architects, has pointed to Japanese metabolist architecture that is famous for buildings that are open for change. And as a successful architect, Karp had indeed traveled to Japan in 1969, which was not so common in Soviet times. Not everybody could travel. So what made the Linnahall special, a very special building in Tallinn at that time, however, was not only its form, but also its location, the former industrial harbor area. It became the first, let me see, so it became the first and also the only place in the Soviet era that offered ordinary people access to the sea in the city center. Of course, the discussions of deindustrialization and the wider public uses of urban space had already reached architectural debates in Soviet Estonia, including the reclaiming of the seafront area for urban life. For example, in 1975, in her diploma thesis that was dedicated to the redevelopment of Tallinn city center, design student Sirje Runga proposed, among other things, the creation of a public park by the former power plant near the Linnahall site, with chimneys emitting colorful and sweet-smelling smoke. Karp himself, together with Dmitri Bruns, Toivo Kallas, and Hein Karu, had been awarded second place in a competition for the planning of the central part of Tallinn in 1972, where the Linnahall site already exists. So it is here, and forming the axis of apex of one axis running through the city center. So the plan, however, also foresaw the demolition of an old 19th century Rotermanni district, which at the end did not happen. So it could be said that the megastructure of the Linnahall was already anachronistic by the time it was completed. Although it received recognition both in the Soviet Union and abroad, so Karp was awarded the State Prize of the Soviet Union, and the building also won a gold medal at the International Union of Architects Congress in 1983. But the more innovative architectural debates, however, revolved around environmentalism, the traditional irregular street grid, etc. For example, Ain Padrik, an architect of the younger generation, criticized the Linnahall for being too laconic, too rational to offer any metaphysical experience. It lacks the irrationality that would make the building charming, enchanting, he wrote in 1984. It remained alien to the city. It was even claimed that it aired a sense of inhospitality. That was exacerbated by the long, often windy walkways on the esplanades and the steep rises of the giant staircases. So at the same time, and this is something that only seems to become fully clear in retrospect, the importance of the Linnahall seems to lie precisely in the public space it creates. As the only public building on the seafront erected during the Soviet era, it marked an important change in urban space. But not only that, Leonhard Lapin, another young and radical architect, saw the uniqueness of this building and this openness to the sea, but equally intriguing is his second claim that the building differs from conventional international modernism because it is designed not to be seen and to be proud of, but to relate to, not the building, but a real urban environment that invites interaction, and which is not just for looking. The authors themselves emphasized that the different platforms and stairs can and should be used for a variety of activities. In a rare interview, Riina Altmäe, the other architect, considers the most important thing about the Linnahall not the building, but exactly the unusual landscape with its rises, falls, craters, city, and sea views, which was to have the greatest impact on the audience. So, despite criticism, it was not until the 1990s that the Linnahall became as controversial as it is today. Even if the landscape of the city hall seemed much too monumental, the stairs too high, and the platforms too windy, the building was bustling with activity, concerts by Soviet and a little later Western rock stars, fashion shows, performances, etc. that took place there. It also hosted political meetings and also of both sides and all parties and conferences. So the first meeting of the Popular Front took place there, but also the Inter-movement found it as a good place for their meetings. And I think the biggest audience was by the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact conference, so in 1988. So after the restoration of Estonia's independence in 1991, discussions and even fierce campaigns for the demolition of the building presenting it as a Soviet symbol began. Indeed, the building was built for the Moscow Olympics. The money came from Moscow, not to mention the workers who were relocated to Estonia to build it. So thus it is an object of labor migration and so can be considered as part of the colonial heritage. However, this is not the main However, this is not the main reason why Linnahall has generated so much controversy. Rather, it is a completely different approach to time and space, but is the real legacy of the Soviet era and makes Linnahall so specific in today's city. It is not the form of the building, its symbolism, but the logic of its use of space that makes it so difficult for the neoliberal order to assimilate. From the perspective of capital, Linnahall is a waste of valuable plots of land on the seashore. So, and this is the state now, or like some time ago. So like the large outdoor terraces of Western post-war modernism, the grand staircases and platforms of Linnahall were to engage the public. And while the building itself is falling into disrepair, crumbling down and covered in graffiti and vegetation, it seems to realize its potential as a valuable public space. So derelict Linnahall, thus as the ice rink, has been closed since 2009 and the whole complex since 2010, so it's more than 10 years already, has become a place of hangout for city's youth, a training ground for skaters, a spontaneous and informal meeting place for others as well. You see it. So I'm just to finish. So it seems that it is only now that the author's intended use of the building actually materializes. It has transformed from building to landscape. It is a space that is less about the former pompousness of the power and more about egalitarianism, or a space that could draw together community or like different communities. So, and it's also a spot for various films, and this was the Hollywood film by Christopher Nolan, and so this is the latest, like the new vision that was presented just a couple of weeks ago or days. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much, Marii. We have to speed up a bit. So for the next presenter, I'm happy to introduce Dr. Andrzej Lesniak, who is an associate professor at the Institute of Literary Research at the Polish Academy of Sciences. After graduating in philosophy, he defended his Ph.D. in art history in 2008. His research focuses on contemporary visual culture and architectural humanities. He has published on pictorial semiology, the French philosophy of images, the work of Rem Koolhaas, and design strategies in contemporary fashion. He's the author of Liquid Image, Georges Didier Bauman and the Discourse of Art History in 2010, and Iconophilia, French Pictorial Semiology and Images in 2013. and he's also the editor of Polish translations of Le Corbusier and Koolhaas' writings. So a wide range of activities. So the floor is yours, please.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I will try to be as brief as possible. As you can see in my title, I'm going to talk about the ambivalence of modernization using the example of the site of the future Museum of Modern Art in Warsaw. This is how this site looks like now. The parade square, Plac Defilat in Polish, is this almost empty piece of land next to a very imposing Palace of Culture from the 1950s. This is how this area looked like before the Second World War. This is more or less the space of the parade square. So it was very densely built with tenement houses. This is how the area looked like in 1945, just after the war. So the parade square was here. All this area was further demolished, and what was created was a kind of a void in Warsaw's urban fabric. This is the parade square, and the image is from 2007. The Palace of Culture is here, and I also want to underline those two temporary commercial structures, commercial halls that will be important further on. I will concentrate on the period between 1989 and 2011 because it was the period when the issue of modernization was the most pressing, I believe. I will start with early 90s. The main attitude of architects at the time was to, in a way, hide the palace, or at least to diminish its visual presence. So this is an effort, a very strange effort to diminish the visual presence of the palace by building a set of high rises around it. And it was, in fact, a winning entry in a competition for the master plan of the city of Warsaw. It was 1992, just after the economic transformation. Of course, it has not been built. I don't know why. But still, the idea of crowning the Palace of Culture to hide it seems to me very striking, at least. This is another master plan from early 2000. It's much quieter, one can say. And what happened in around 2000? The mayor of Warsaw decided to pursue this master plan, and to build the Museum of Modern Art on the parade square. It means So here it was to be the building of the museum was to be erected here. And in the statute of the competition, the city very clearly stated that that the new building, the building of the Museum of Modern Art, should be a new symbol of Warsaw. It was the era when Frank Gehry's architecture was still loved, and the Bilbao effect was still considered something valuable. It was 2006. But strangely, the competition was won by a Swiss architect, Christian Keres, who proposed something very modest, as you see. And this proposition was very quickly mocked by the public, who began circulating such images as this on the internet. So there was a public opposition to the modesty of the minimalist building of Christian Keres, but there was even more important opposition in the jury. A large chunk of the jury decided to propose to endorse another entry by Ala architects, I think, by Finnish architects collaborating with some Polish architects, who proposed a very strange hybrid, extremely spectacular hybrid of a blob on one side and a screen on the other. So you have, this is the epitome of spectacle. Modern communication technology on one side and Frank Gehry or something similar on the other. But the city decided to pursue the project of Christian Keres. It was very complicated. It didn't work out, but still, this is what happened. And after this discussion about aesthetics, because it was primarily the discussion about aesthetics, do we need the new symbol of Warsaw, something very spectacular, or something more, let's say, functional or simply modest? After this competition, after 2007, the discussion shifted a bit towards the discussion about the sense of modernization. And the representatives of the institution, of the museum, for example, the head of the museum, Joanna Metkowska, stated very explicitly that this building, both the building and the institution, are the highlights of modernization of not only of Warsaw but of the country of Poland. The Museum of Modern Art is civilizational and state building, so it's an extremely strong statement. But this mission, this modernizing mission, has been very quickly put to a test. This is 2009, and what you see here is one of those temporary commercial structures. And what happened in 2009 was a kind of eviction by the city authorities of merchants from those structures. It has been known since as a KDT battle, and it was indeed very violent. The modernizing mission of the museum was not accepted by those who conducted the commercial interest in this area. So you can see it was really a battle. You can read here KDT, so those halls are alive. No, so it's an image of a kind of martyrdom of local life who clashed with the globalizing power of the Museum of Modern Art. Yes, it was depicted in this way at the time. In 2011, so a bit later on, the deputy director of the museum, Marcel Andino Velez, wrote a text about the building, and it was extremely curious because he called the people who used this space, who used this site, in this way: agrarian society of Slavs. What happened after the eviction of the merchants? There was there still is, I think, a kind of still temporary bus station in this area. And the people who come to Warsaw from the province very often use this bus station simply to arrive in the capital. So I can show you how the agrarian Slavs look like. They look like this. You still can see the spatial arrangement, which is unacceptable from modern point of view, from progressive point of view, because it's temporary, it's not artistic, and this is the kind of people who are not really expected from the point of view of the institution who aims at modernizing the whole country. And what you get in the space is such a temporary, unacceptable arrangement. This is another picture. So you can feel the horror of the representatives of the museum who wanted to have their siege here, but what they get is people, some agrarian Slavs, some coming to the center from Sokołów Podlaski on the east. So this is really unacceptable. Of course, this sentence, I know Marcel Andinoveres personally. He's not a bad guy at all. I think he was a journalist before his career in artwork. So I believe this was a kind of journalistic stylization of a text. He's not very condescending. He's not elitist. But I think it's rather a kind of symptom of ambivalence of modernization. That on the one hand, it is something that is considered necessary in this space. On the other hand, there are always multiple obstacles here. And to finish with an optimistic image, this is what we can encounter on the Parade Square now. This is the almost ready building of the future Museum of Modern Art. This is the project by American architect, by American architects Pfeiffer and Partners. So it's not Christian Karras anymore, but the form is, let's say similar. It will be finished in a few months, I believe. And what is striking is that the discussion about this site shifted again from the question of modernization to aesthetics, like in 2007. So when the building was erected, the people of Warsaw began commenting on what they can encounter in the space of the city. Of course, now it happens on social media. It's very quick. The reactions are very rapid. So what is important for me in this case, in case of this site, is this logic of ambivalence. It started with a discussion on the question of aesthetics. It shifted to modernization. Now we all feel modern in Warsaw, so we can talk again about the aesthetics. This is, I believe, of course, a very simplified version, but a history of the process on the Parade Square. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And now we are moving further to Ukraine. And I'm happy to introduce Dr. Irina Matsevko, who is a historian and Deputy Vice-Chancellor of the Kharkiv School of Architecture, which by now has relocated from Kharkiv to Lviv. In 2001, Irina Matsevko defended a thesis on the ideology of Neo-Slavism, and its reception in the intellectual and political circles of Galicia in the early 20th century. Her academic interests include social and cultural history of Soviet Ukraine, urban history, urban heritage and practices, as a driver of sustainability in cities and communities. She has been an academic coordinator and then deputy director and head of the public history programs at the Center of Urban History in Lviv. And she has also acted as an independent researcher and manager of culture projects, dealing with urban memories and intangible urban heritages, and continues with all this valuable work into today.
Yeah.
The floor is yours.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you very much for introduction, and thank you very much for invitation for this conference. It looks really exciting and very intensive. I would like to start my presentation with a quote from the interview with the German archaeologist Dr. Margaret von S., whose words resonate me deeply. War can destroy cultural heritage twice, in conflict and in cleaning up. She argues that during the removal of ruins, heritage suffers no less, even more, than during the initial destruction. This statement can be used in a broader context that goes beyond the work with material values of historical objects. War destroys historical structure, but war also affects and challenges the understanding and meaning of heritage. War sharps feelings and raises emotions in discussions about the past. The heritage that was considerable, uncomfortable, dissonant, and controversial before the war has a chance after the war be both a tool for stirring up the pre-war tensions and conflicts in local communities and a tool for establishment, dialogue, reconciliation, and new identity for post-war cities. So in my presentation, I will briefly introduce the heritage discourse in Ukraine, focusing on the analysis of how contemporary Ukrainian society and academia define the social values of modernist heritage and what challenge they face in rethinking and reuse of modernist buildings, as well as in shaping the post-war city identity. So as I am historian, the focus of my presentation is on the intangible values of heritage, which shape materiality and which determine approaches to the preservation and reuse of historical objects. The modernist heritage of Ukraine is incredibly rich and at the same time extremely complex. It combines the best example of functionalist and constructivist architecture, which share the common ideas but different ideological context and state affiliation in the past to the Polish state and the Soviet Union. The biggest challenge for Ukrainian society is that the modernist architecture in the eastern and central part of Ukraine was built during the Soviet time. Even before the war, the Soviet modernist heritage of Ukraine divided society into those who want to destroy Soviet buildings and sites in the urban landscape and those who believe that every modernist object should be preserved and not subject to any changes in its new use. In such a situation, Soviet modernist buildings have no chance of being included in contemporary life, urban life, with new interpretation and new social values. They can either be destroyed or conserved. This approach makes the Soviet modernist heritage a trigger for tension and conflict in the society rather than a potential for urban development. The war has altered this polarization. Now the public discourse is dominated by a one-sided assumption that Ukraine can put an end to its colonial past if it destroyed everything Soviet structure that was imposed on it by force. It is already difficult for experts and for researchers to pose critical questions. What and why should be considered the modernist heritage of Ukraine? Should the artistic component component alone be an argument for preserving a modernist buildings. How to reconcile the Soviet and the Ukrainian in a modernist heritage, and how to combine the Soviet and the Ukrainian in to integrate modernist heritage of Ukraine into the broader global heritage discourse. Using the case of Kharkiv, I would like to analyze the current discussion on the Soviet heritage and outline the controversy and the challenges the Ukrainian researchers and experts face in approaching it. The war uncovered different layers in the destroyed buildings, revealing richness and complexity of the heritage of the 20th century in Kharkiv as well as other Ukrainian cities. These are the imperial Russian heritage, as Kharkiv used to belong to Russian Empire. The earlier Soviet heritage, which refers to cities' modernization and shaping Ukrainian modernity, and the Stalinist one, associated with repressions, terrors, and control. So the ruin uncovered an already not so very comfortable imperial heritage, appealing earlier modernist heritage, and undesirable Stalinist heritage. On this slide, you can see building of the Kharkiv region administration in Svoboda Avenue. It is one of the prominent buildings that dominate the square. The building was seriously damaged during the first weeks of the full scale of invasion. Luckily, it keeps its monumental facade, which refers to the Stalinist architecture, and at the same time revealed these three heritage layers overlapped in built structure. Unfortunately, I don't have time to tell a story about it, but you can really see all these layers. So the destruction opens a discussion on the future of these buildings as well as on Stalinist architecture in Ukraine. What was the focus of this discussion? So here I am presenting you a few quotes from these discussions, and as you can see, all of them don't go beyond the discourse of style. Some experts say that all the styles have the rights to exist, avoiding the complex context of relating this architecture to a totalitarian regime. Others try to Ukrainize Stalinist architecture and by doing so justify its existence and preservation. The specific focus on tangible issues in heritage practices is quite problematic when we are dealing with a controversial heritage. The discourse of style avoid an important value-related questions related to the context of in which the objects were built and to the context in which they live their life now. In this particular case, the expert discussion avoid the need for profound reflection on the complicated and multidimensional Soviet legacy of Ukraine, the need for rethinking of Soviet Ukraine as both an integral part and an agent of the Soviet project, while also acknowledging the victimization influenced by the regime. This discussion also eliminates the chance for Ukrainian academia to approach the discourse of shared heritage. The concept of shared heritage defines heritage not as a representation of the nation's heroic past, but as a complex, contradictory, and not always pleasant history, the comprehension of which offers the potential to foster an open, inclusive, and tolerate society. Another case is the Railway Workers' Palace of Culture, related to earlier modernist heritage of the 20s. It is even more complicated and challenging. for me. The modernist architecture of the 20s placed Ukraine within the global context of modernism. The involvement of Soviet architects in the global modernist movement, encouraged by their belief in Bolshevik ideas of progress, equality, and social justice, gave us the tremendous architectural heritage of the 20s and earlier 30s. It posed the questions: is it only Ukrainian heritage, or merely Soviet? Or perhaps it is Soviet-Ukrainian, or does it transcend the national context to be considered a global heritage? The destruction of the palace of railway workers by Russian missiles has gained considerable resonance in the professional community, as it was one of the best preserved modernist buildings in Kharkiv and in Ukraine. Again, unfortunately, I don't have time to tell about this. The discussion reveals challenges that Ukrainian researchers face in appropriating the earlier modernist built heritage in Ukraine. And I would like to highlight a few of them. First, the common tendency is to separate the Soviet and the Ukrainian in the modernist architecture, and to consider modernist architecture out of the political context of establishment of the Soviet Union. As a historian, I found the statement of architectural historians quite manipulative. They claim that the period of the 20s, when the Bolsheviks' new economic policy was a period of total freedom and experimentation without an ideological basis and restriction from the state. In other words, it was not Soviet regime yet. Another concerning tendency is that attempt to locate the modernist architecture within a narrow ethnic framework by inventing the term Ukrainian constructivism, arguing that constructivist buildings were built in Ukraine by Ukrainian architects in origin. That was not always the case. For money from the budget of the Ukrainian Soviet Republic, what is obvious. The researcher ignored the fact that local architects played an important role in the discussion on new architecture for a new society that took place in Moscow in the center of the Soviet project. They were linked very much with Soviet-Russian architects, but not in the hierarchical relation between center and the periphery, but in horizontal relation as equal actors of the Soviet modern project. And the best modernist architects, regardless of ethnicity, jointly created Soviet modernist architecture in discussion and in open architectural competition of the 20s. So that is why the best Ukrainian modernist architecture were designed by the best Soviet Ukrainian and Soviet Russian architectures who won competitions. The most threatening tendency, in my opinion, is the aspiration of researchers to exclude the modernist movement of the 20s in Ukraine from the grand narrative of Soviet modernism. And the problem is that if we declare that Ukraine was not part of the Soviet modernist movement, we allow Russia to monopolize our heritage. This makes Russian claim to Soviet modernism as inherently Russian stronger. Additionally, but not asserting Ukraine as a significant contributor to the Soviet modernist architecture, we acknowledged a subordinate role of Ukraine as a supplier of human and natural resources for Soviet modernization. Most importantly, by excluding ourselves from Soviet modernist grand narrative, Ukraine loses its place in the global modernist heritage in the 21st century. And the shaping of new post-identity of Ukrainian city will largely depend on how we deal with our controversial modernist heritage. Will we see it as a part of a new landscape of the post-war cities, critically reflecting on it and providing it with new meanings to continue its life? Or will we silence it and hide it in the city's landscape? The direction of heritage practices after the war will have a profound impact on whether post-war cities will develop on the basis of openness to its complicated past and tolerance for diversity, or whether they will be characterized by exclusivity and artificially created borders. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Verena. And for our last presenter, we are going to close the round and come back to Poland. I'm introducing Dr. Aleksandra Sumorok, who is an art historian who studied at the University of Łódź and earned her Ph.D. at the Faculty of Architecture of the Wrocław University of Technology. She's currently working at the Academy of Fine Arts in Łódź, focusing her research on Polish architecture and design in the 20th century, with particular emphasis on the period of socialist realism. She's the author of various monographs, solo and together with Thomas Saluszki. She has received a research grant from the National Science Center to study the Polish interiors from the years 1949 to 56, and has also curated exhibitions. So the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, it's a great pleasure to be here and to talk about post-war architecture as well as socialist realism as a part of this heritage. 10 minutes is a challenge, but I will try to do it in my speech in this time. Let's wait a bit. Socialist, is it? Can we have the full screen? Slideshow. Ah, okay, thank you. Socialist realism is a specific cultural phenomenon, of course, affecting various fields and levels many years after so-called defeat. It is included in many different narratives, which also often deform and distort the image of the architecture of the time. Nowadays, with the increasing time distance, the need to develop not reductionist approach in research is becoming more and more evident. These were complicated times and I'm sorry, I can't. Oh, no. Right now. These were complicated times with complex architecture, and we are dealing with, of course, complex heritage. And for sure, it shouldn't be reduced to simple oppositions, bad, good, modern, traditional, progressive, anachronic. Today, most researchers notice the non-monolithic character and nature of architecture of the first half past of the 50s. And they rather talk about socialist realisms in plural than one unifying socialist realism. And not only monumental buildings are taking of political significance, are taking into account, are analyzed, but also of architecture that meets pragmatic goals, cultural centers and housing estates. Stalinist architecture has a long research tradition and multitude of established interpretative models. Of course, the political context had a significant impact on its shape and perspectives. Dominant perspectives revolve around political, ideological, and aesthetic aspects of the 50s. The socialist realist architecture was rejected, of course, during the thaw.
The first attempt to analyze socialist rallies in historical and artistic terms took place in the late 70s, in Poland, of course, in the late 70s and 80s. Among others, the papers, works of Krzysztof Stefański, Wojciech Włodarczyk, and Waldemar Baraniewski were important. Their papers, historical now, are a starting point for the research. And then, for almost a decade, the phenomenon was forced out of the critical discourse. Interest increased after the year 2000. Most often, the architecture, of course, was placed in totalitarian context, which implied concepts such as propaganda, persuasion, institutionalization, or doctrinal categories. Other perspectives were based on the criterion of form, and this perspective appeared with the intensified discussion on the necessity of protection of buildings from the 50s. Seminars, meetings were organized to develop principles for assessing this architecture. It contributed not only to protection, but also to legitimization of this architecture and provided impulse to start research on architecture itself, but also on architects treated as creators, not only as executors of administrative orders. The architect became a social actor and the key to noticing the various negotiations in the sphere of ideas and forms. Important at the same time became sociological and anthropological approach, works of Sheila Fitzpatrick, Katrina Clark, this bottom-up, not top-down analysis. And also of participation of Polish society in post-war social revolution was noticed, mainly and due to a book of Patrick Kenny. As a result of this non-monolithic unifying nature of architecture, its diversity was noticed and pointed out by researchers, and it was no longer seen in opposition to modernism. It was rooted in pre-war practices, and it can be seen not only in Polish architecture, but of course also in other cities. This project, this diversification is visible even in the most prestigious projects in each country, which also differ from each other. Karl-Marx-Allee is different than Marszałkowska housing estates, and of course new cities differ from each other. Dunewi Warhoši, Eisenhüttenstadt, Dimitrovgrad, or Nowa Huta. As well as the most prestigious buildings like NEP Stadion in Budapest and 10th Anniversary Stadium in Warsaw. Today, very important in Polish research is taking modernization perspective into account. And architecture became the tool for this modernization process, especially in social and culture, its social and cultural aspects. Today, socialist realism is historical legacy. The changing attitudes toward the architecture of the first post-war decade is illustrated up to some point, of course, by the history of entries in the register of monuments. The first buildings were included on the list in the 70s. There were monumental complexes of social significance and political significance. It was Parliament and all Parliament complex, also with post-war buildings. And with exceptional interiors. In the 70s, Great Theatre in Łódź became a monument, as well as Palace of Culture in Dąbrowa Górnicza, which is in fact the second largest Palace of Culture in Poland. In democratic Poland, after 1989, the first entries in the register were in fact made after 10 years, after the year 2000, with two exceptions, with two buildings in Białystok. They were listed in the early 90s. In some way, the turning point in perceiving architecture and in research was in 2004, when Nowa Huta urban layout became a monument. And it was very positively received by the public. At the same time, or even earlier, the promotion of Nowa Huta and research began. There was a kind of museum opened, exhibitions were held, and the books on Nowa Huta were published. However, in 2007, Palace of Culture and Science became a monument, and this is probably the only example of a really problematic, controversial, and emotional entry on the list. Committee of Architecture and Urban Planning of Polish Academy of Sciences, at this time in 2007, stated that Palace does not represent values justifying recognition as a legally protected monument. But this is a historical issue. It was a political issue, and the votes for destruction of Palace of Culture and Science were rather a political gesture than a real action. Neither did it really translate into social interests. And the entries go on. In 2010, more additions and more entries and monuments were listed. Initially, the buildings avoiding historical stylization were listed, like a very modern one, like the Stromstop in which modernist youth palace, but with very hybrid interiors, or observatory and planetarium in Chorzów listed in 2013. It depends on many factors, this entry. Among others, on social recognition of the object, of complex, but also on the local conservation office and authorities, but also more iconic representative for socialist realist buildings were listed, like Palace of Culture in Gdańsk. It was listed in 2012, and it is in a really bad shape right now. But also the Palace of Culture in Rzeszów at almost the same time was listed. Many buildings started to be protected after 2015. New entries were made, as well as addition to existing ones, and truly iconic monumental buildings were included, like Wojewódzki Office in Rzeszów, but also finally Marszałkowska Housing Estate. Finally said Jakub Lewicki, because it was the third attempt to place it in the register. But also Nowa Huta Central Square was listed, and administration office buildings as well. Unfortunately, many of iconic buildings no longer exist, like cinema in Gdańsk. Only the mosaic was saved and replaced, or the 5th anniversary stadium, which I showed before. Many, of course, have been transformed and have lost their original character, like tourist office in Zakopane, which I presented here. Sometimes the awareness, knowledge are the key factor, of course, for protection, of, especially in the field of interiors. And these entries, as well as positive social reception of these buildings today, show that this is not difficult, even troublesome heritage. And many of complexes became a cultural good like Nowa Huta. It also stresses very much Jacek Purchla. Nowa Huta became a historical monument this year in 2023. However, it is well accepted right now, but it is paradoxically invisible in general. And especially young people have not enough knowledge about socialist realism and post-war architecture, and they can point out only one building, Palace of Science and Culture. The other buildings are not known and are becoming invisible for them. Thank you very much.
So, thank you, Alexandra. We are short of time, but yeah, we started about 15 minutes late with our panel. So I'd still like to invite all the participants here to join for a general discussion. And I would like to collect some questions, whether you're addressing them to all of the participants or to specifically somebody. So just gather them and then discuss them all together.
Well, first of all, thank you for the papers and your rather brief presentations, unfortunately. I have two questions. One is for Dr. Matsevko. My question is in regard to policy and whether you foresee or you can tell us a bit about any type of change in policy in heritage protection from the pre-war period, and if it's something being done in that regard, as you mentioned, for the hopefully soon post-war years in regard to protection of the Soviet-era monuments. And the second one is for Dr. Laanemets, I apologize, and is actually inspired by the Berlin presentation, Berlin paper. My question is about the public opinion and the public understanding of this heritage, because you mentioned how Berliners are receptive and accepting of various types of heritage. So we heard about the architects and we heard about the neoliberal actors, but I'm curious, what is the average citizen of Tallinn's understanding of this space? How do they respond to it, and whether there's really any type of reaction to it? Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else?
Yes, I also have a similar question regarding the public perception of such environments. Not so much the objects, but you know, for instance, how much the public opinion can be kind of shaped in order to kind of appreciate qualities. Like I think of films like Kieslowski's Ten Commandments, kind of playing in a housing complex in Poland, or in Hungary, an extremely popular series in the television, also playing in similar environments. How the lived space, you know, corresponds the imagined or the conceived place in terms of Henri Lefebvre. You know, whether you can really take public opinion as something given, or something that is constantly changing, and it is also the responsibility of architects, historians, and so on, to take it as part of the project, so to say.
Thank you. These are already really broad issues, but I guess we can take at least one more question.
I would be interested if Mr. Rauhut could maybe tell us something about the Modellverfahren, Mäusebunker, if it was a good tool to actually like bring the difficult late modernist objects into the awareness of the public, and if it could become like a standard tool for heritage protection offices.
Okay, thank you. I guess we start with the more specifically targeted questions, and then continue with the general ones. This one should work too, if you can share this.
So about the policy before war and now before the war, to tell the truth, Ukraine were not prepared. And if we talk about the municipality and also the museums and other infrastructure which are responsible for heritage, were not prepared to protect it. So it's happened the first months of the war that international institutions support us and gave money to protect some monuments. So now the biggest issue is to document the damages, and also the big discussion how to change the policy of heritage management and what should be rebuilt, what shouldn't be rebuilt, and also have to make this process more inclusive, because before it mostly was the case of the state and local authorities who had to take care about heritage. Now there is a big discussion how to include local communities, because it should be their voice, because they will live in the cities after the war. So, and this is very, very important things, and a lot of UNESCO is involved very much in this process now. So I believe that after the war, this process will go smoother. But we also need a lot of regulations and also change a lot of regulations, because in this sphere we still are in this post-Soviet stage, when a lot of law regulation is still inherited by Soviet time. So, so the war gave us also the chance to rethink it and to make this process of heritage management more inclusive.
Shall I? Yeah, so the public opinion, I think it also has changed a lot. I mean, when it was still like kind of working, so people weren't there, but I think they were not maybe so interested or more ignorant. But now, since that has been closed already now, I think 13 years, so and kind of also there is a kind of nostalgia towards all what is like Soviet when it is disappearing. So that it's not it's the most discussed, but there is also a lot of buildings demolished and or like completely rebuilt, and the public opinion, just one example, because in the summer there was an art exhibition organized by Estonian curator Margit Säde, and it was obvious that some people even queued for 2 hours to go in and to see it again. So I think now, yeah, it's definitely more people who would now appreciate it. So I don't know if they would go to the barricades for it, but lots of cultural people, I think so.
I was asked about the role of the public and models to safeguard heritage, and I think the public appreciation of heritage is the key of safeguarding heritage which is in danger. Because as a heritage also we are very good in our daily work, but if we are under real economic threat with heritage or a real political threat. We really need the public appreciation of heritage to safeguard heritage. But the tricky thing about the public opinion is, the public appreciation is, it's not there yet, but it can also be formed. That's a good thing. It's also on a political level. We know how easy that is nowadays with images and all kind of other means. And I do believe, even as a heritage authority, we can support this process, and that's basically what we do in the Modellverfahren Mäusebunker or in other projects, that we very much try to support this process of a wide public appreciation of a certain heritage, and the means have to be different in every context. But my experience that many times providing information is the first key to really make heritage also readable, because for the wider public, buildings are not, they're just buildings. We have to provide the information to also recognize the stories, and that's where I see as our part as heritage authorities, for example.
Alexandra and Andrzej, you want to comment on these issues of community and public as well, perhaps?
It's difficult to measure the public awareness, but I have conducting a kind of a survey. Of course, it's not a scientific one, but I have a lot of students, and it's thousands of young people, and I also ask my colleagues at university and technical university to ask every year the question, what building do they know? And I have been conducting this so-called research for 15 years. And the answer is the same. They haven't noticed the architecture, not only socialist realism, but also post-war. Because young people, for them that is the time of dinosaurs. And they do not distinguish, unfortunately, the post-war architecture, if it is socialist realism, if it is modernist, they just don't know. And unfortunately, they are students of art history and architecture. So it is a little bit depressing. They are not lawyers, or I'm not doing the Soviet medical university. But I think that it is not the problem. It is our, as it was said, maybe not a problem, but I feel that we should learn more and to pay attention to get this knowledge better understand. They have to have knowledge, and they will understand it better. But they do not problems with acceptance. When I am showing different examples, when I am talking about it, they have no problems. They like it. If it is Palace of Science of Culture, if it is post-war, if it is post-war housing estate, they have no problems with it. But and they are totally interested. And the need for post-war modern is very high right now, not only in architecture, but I can see also this in graphic design. For example, there are a lot of books on graphic design in Poland, researching and doing this modernity on the sphere of graphic design. The need is great, but I think that this is the work to do. Thank you.
Thank you. I would add, responding partly to Professor Morawiecki's question, that public opinion can be shaped also in a negative way, in the negative direction. What I mean by this is that this heritage is sometimes used or referred to by politicians to generate negative political effects. For example, the most important example we both shared, the Palace of Science and Culture in Warsaw, is often referred to by Polish right-wing politicians. Not very often, but still, it happens as a symbol of as a symbol of former Soviet domination. It's called a gift of Stalin, just to generate a sort of this negative political affectivity. It's not very. It doesn't work anymore, I think, because the younger generations have in fact appropriated this building as their own. It's no longer considered a Stalinist building. It's considered a Warsaw people's building. So it doesn't work, but still it is possible in a certain political context to shape public opinion in this negative, affective direction, I believe.
So thank you very much for your question. I would just add one more question to your question. Who shaped the public opinion? And here I just want to come back to us, to experts, to researchers, to teachers, to institutions, because people are shaping with some common things which they read, which they hear, which they are taught. So, and here we share the common challenges in this post-socialist countries. The attitude to this Soviet past is quite complicated, and I would say that the perception of this socialist and communist past, it's not diverse. So first we have the Museum of Totalitarian Regimes, which are quite complicated things. In our museums, in all our countries, in the Soviet period, there is the stress on the state as a controller of everything, and also the people who resist it. So generally this history is presented like a black and white, you know, and it reflects on heritage, and it reflects on architecture. So that I'm very happy to hear that the discourse of modernist and socialist architecture changed in Poland very much for the last time. But before, you know, if it's Soviets or socialists, it's automatically bad, you know. And people are shaped with these things from school, from museums, from public narration. So, and I think that it's really responsible of researcher, architects to run public history projects, to tell this diverse story, not black and white, but really very multidimensional, you know. And then the attitude to this heritage and to this built heritage which also change.
Thank you. I'm thinking about two aspects that could perhaps help to communicate the value of these things. One actually comes from a presentation when we're trying to actually name whose heritage is it. Is it difficult? It's not only local, it's also global heritage. Perhaps this change in perspective could help us, meaning that none of this has been built in isolation, but in dialogue with all the different places, which means that we also have like a global responsibility. Even if this sounds a bit grand, it's actually true. And the other aspect which we didn't discuss here today is of course sustainability. It's always more sustainable to preserve than to demolish and rebuild, which could also help to advance these discussions, I believe. But now I'm afraid I have to wrap it up, and I really thank you for participating, and also thank you for doing all this very important work elsewhere as well. Yeah, so thanks, and continue on the lunch.